Here we go. Look at
All
this
right.
guy, best-selling author, and a new book. It's Only Drowning. It's so good. David Litt, congratulations. A true story of learning to surf and the search for common ground. You know we love you here at Stand Up, and I'm psyched that I'm getting to talk to you. Congrats on the book, man.
Thank you, Pete. It's always good to talk. Also, now I'm going to do something totally unprofessional. I mean, I forgot to put the do not disturb on, so the camera's going to wobble a tiny bit. This is behind the scenes. There we
What do
go.
you mean?
Okay.
Do not disturb
I
makes it. Oh, you're. I
well,
see.
yeah. That way, I won't. If I get a text message, that won't annoy everybody. Instead, I'm going to annoy everybody by telling them about putting on the do not disturb. Okay, that was. this,
No,
this is going great so far. Love this. Love this.
I'll
Yeah,
do
I'm sure
all
you're
the
so excited you had me back.
I'll do all the real moments, man. You know,
That's right.
I'm born and raised a live stand-up comedian. Whatever happens, happens. Really, at this point.
Yeah, well, that's well, we can talk stand up too at some point, because I'm curious. I have questions for you at the moment, but
Well, maybe that should be your next book too. Maybe that I
yeah,
don't know.
maybe.
I don't know what your next. I mean, you got like a 2-book deal to write 2 memoirs, and I don't understand why anybody is that good. Like you're great. You're
Well,
very, very good. You're very funny, original, thoughtful. I would say you're a generational talent, but come on.
well, that's nice of you to say, and I appreciate it. But no, the thing about two book deals, I was very excited, still am, because it is pretty rare to get a book deal where they're like, okay, go do something interesting and funny, and then write about it.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And yeah, and so this is the first of those books. So this was, this one I knew what the story was, and then as part of that, my editor, Max Meltzer, who's awesome, he was like, "Yeah, okay, I trust you. I think you could do another one as well." And now we're both kind of like having these conversations. We're like, "Wait a second, what exactly is book worthy that's happened in my life? Not
That's
not a lot recently." So we're gonna
honestly,
have to figure something out. But
I
it's kind of fun. It's good to have the pressure.
yeah, well, if you say so. I thought about that question after I was getting, when I done kind of prepping the interview, I was about to talk to you today, and I was like, how do you come up with an idea? Because there could be an amazing idea on paper, but then the way you wrote this book, you had to live a life and do a thing with a person. And how do you know it's going to end up being a good book or something or not?
Yeah,
It's just like seems like such a risk. So I say congratulations for doing it, and it's so good. You did a great job. So
thank you.
congrats.
Yeah, well, let me tell you or tell the people who are listening a little bit more about
Yeah,
this
please
book, and
go ahead.
then we can talk about the good problem that I feel like there's a lot of dilemmas going on in the world, and being like, what's my next book going to be about? Doesn't quite rise to the level of like top priority for the universe, but it's on my mind. So this book, I didn't. My wife was under very like I had made her promise. I was like, I'm going to come to you at some point and say I want to write another book, and your job is to tell me no. And we had this conversation, and my job was to tell you no, and I'm telling you no. And for a very long time, I tried to grind her down, but it didn't work. And then I started surfing, and I think I kind of snuck it in because I was like, this isn't a book. Like, I'm not a good surfer. I was 35 years old, starting to surf for the first time, pretty pathetic at it, just needed a hobby. And I think she was like, oh, that's, it's a hobby. What's the worst that could happen? And then I was like, actually, I think there's a book here. And then I really started working on her. And finally, she was like, yeah, okay, fine. There's a book there. And I think that for me, with a book, there's 3 conditions that need to be met for a book, like not for me to want to talk about something, but for me to think other people might want to listen and read it.
No,
So
go
one,
ahead, brother.
yeah,
Yeah.
so one is I feel like I have to be embarrassing myself because that's just fun. 2, I have to be learning something because a book, a memoir in particular, it's got to be the story of how you changed. So how you became who you are. So you can do that in the like, Pete, I'm sure you're working on Pete Dominica life, right? And so like you're like I was born in a log cabin and here I am today, and you do your whole life. You can do that. I also like the memoirs that are shorter, right? It's like here's how I became who I am in a small way, which It's Only Drowning is. And then the third thing, so embarrassing myself, learning stuff, and then the stuff I'm learning has to be, at least I think it is, relevant to other people. So that it's not just stuff that I learned, or in this case, it's not just like I learned how to turn a surfboard. It's like I learned things about facing fear and how I think about success and what it means to live life with joy at a time when like you read the news and it's not super joyful, right? Like, how do you do all of that? And I'm like, oh, I know these secrets and now I want to share these secrets. So to me, that's a book. That has not happened again yet. I assume it will at some point.
Well,
But
it's a great combination: embarrassment, learning, and being relevant. And it's also great. I feel like I didn't think about it that way. Everybody talks about a memoir, and everybody makes the joke that no one's life is so interesting that I would want to read about it. Certainly not until you're 80, no matter who you are.
yeah,
And but you're talking about capturing a moment in time, a year, a couple of years, an experience, an Appalachian Trail, whatever, and including all the parts of your life, but talking more about that experience, which is really what you did here. And I now will allow for it. I will allow for that
okay.
kind of. I like it a lot. I like the way you describe it, and I certainly like this book a lot and what you attempted to do and accomplished here. So, what was the idea here?
So this started during the pandemic and then kind of immediately post-pandemic when all of the variants popped up and stuff like that. I got pretty depressed. I've always been like a high functioning, high anxiety person. I've never been depressed before. And this was the first time I was like really just in it in a bad way. And 6 months after kind of the worst of that depression, when I think I was just looking for some way to break out of this, I started surfing. And the reason I did in part was we moved to Asbury Park on the Jersey Shore. So it was, we're 5 minutes from the beach, which is really nice. And partly because my crazy brother-in-law, Matt, is a surfer. And for a very long time, I was like, therefore, I will never surf. And then as I started to honestly feel like less comfortable with myself, and I saw that he was doing really well during the pandemic, I started to say, okay, well, actually, maybe I'm going to try something a little crazy. And so I'll try something that the craziest person I know does. And this started off as a book very much about just me learning to surf, right? It was like, could I make it to the North Shore of Hawaii and surf a big wave? And that's still in there. But ultimately, and this totally surprised me, the person I ended up spending the most time with surfing was Matt, my brother-in-law. And it really became this story about two guys on the opposite side of every one of the fault lines, political, cultural, you name it, that are dividing the country and the world even. Can the two of us find a way to become friends anyway? And what does that mean? And so I think, this, like I said, it kind of started off as like a book about an exciting adventure, and it still is to some extent. But really, it's, I almost structured it like a rom-com, actually. It's like a will they, won't they about this friendship.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great way of putting it. Tell us more about Matt and where he's coming from. This is your brother-in-law, your wife's brother. What was your relationship like with him prior to this? Like, what was it like when you met the guy? I mean, because it seems like there's the before times and the after times. Maybe you want to say Trump,
Yeah.
or after, I don't know, or some other event or media narrative or the pandemic. But what's he like?
Well, I met Matt in 2012, and like the moment I met him, I was like, okay, seems like a perfectly nice guy, but we have literally nothing in common. So,
Mm.
he is covered in tattoos, and like the last time I got a temporary tattoo, I think was like I was 22 years old, right? Like that is a level of commitment I'm not comfortable with. Matt is an elect.
Why don't you say you're too smart for this joke? But why didn't the joke? He's covered in tattoos. I'm a Jew. Is that too like some more and more Jewish people are getting tattoos and breaking the rules?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like I think I'm not orthodox enough to know the exact rules around tattoos.
I don't think you'll be written in the book of life. I'll tell you that. That's what I've.
Well, yeah, and I will also say that I don't. The reason I don't have a tattoo has nothing to do with my religion, and a lot more to do with my nervousness about anything permanent. And then like Matt. So Matt's an electrician. I'm a writer. Matt, he owns two motorcycles. I have never even ridden on a motorcycle, and I suspect I never will. So we're just like totally different. And then also, Matt is a huge Joe Rogan fan. I obviously used to write for President Obama, where we don't see eye to eye on not even politics, but on like the way the world works. And all of that was kind of, these were factoids, right, before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, and especially when vaccination came up, all of this stuff started to mean everything, right? Like, Matt didn't get vaccinated. I did, obviously. And it felt like not just that we were, on different sides of something important. And I'm not both sidesing it, right? Like, I think I made the correct choice. But it wasn't just the sense of like, I'm doing something and he's doing something I think is wrong. it was this sense of like, okay, I need to be rude to him almost. Like we can't, if we were friendly, I would be letting down my values.
Sure.
And so I think there was like those social distancing element, but also just keeping distance more broadly. And it was really only because we started surfing together that we ever ended up spending time together. And I think in a way, right, it's a book about a lot of things, but it's in some ways a book about me being less judgmental, right? It's not and I want to be very clear about this. It's not about saying everybody's equally right about everything. It's about saying every person deserves respect, even if they do things or think things that you think are totally wrong. And when I say every person, I mean the vast majority of people, right? Like if Stephen Miller was my brother-in-law, we would be having a very different conversation, but he's not, thankfully.
Sometimes people will say, and this is definitely a question I wanted to ask you, how you cope with this, how you deal with this ethically, morally. If you don't recognize my humanity and my existence, you hear it a lot of times with people on
Hmm.
the sexual orientation spectrum. I'm gay. If you don't recognize I'm trans, if you don't recognize, and of course you hear from people of color as well. And what do you think about that being kind of a litmus test, or just even for a parent child relationship or a sibling relationship, they sometimes break over those things. How do you
Yeah.
deal with that? Does that come up?
It does. One of the things that I have found, I mean, I've heard from a lot of different people about a lot of different friendships and family relationships in the 3 weeks since the book has come out. People telling me about, this is somebody where we used to be able to speak. We used to be friends. Now I've blocked him in my phone, right? And my point isn't to be like, I am, going to micromanage everybody's relationship with someone you disagree with, because I think every interpersonal relationship is different. That's part of what makes being a human
Absolutely.
being special.
Great point.
But I think that sort of cutting people out of your life, in my opinion, should be the last straw, not the first straw, right? It's not the first step. And I think that's the difference. Where, for example, I got a kind of angry email recently from somebody who said there was somebody in my life. He got really into Trump, a lot of conspiracy theories. Every time we talked, he just was like meaner and meaner to me. And after, I tried. And then after years, I was like, we just can't be friends anymore. And I was like, to me, that's actually kind of what I'm talking about is the trying, right? It doesn't mean that it's always gonna work, but it does mean that trying to keep the door open is there's two things about it. One is I think it makes life more interesting and you learn a lot, right? One of the things this book is about is you can learn, and in fact, you can learn even more from people who see the world differently than you do. So part of it is just almost a selfishness of like, your life will be better. You will learn more stuff if there are some people in your life who see the world totally differently than you. The other thing is, as we think about a moment when Democrats have to win back voters who we lost, keeping the door open and allowing those friendships or family relationships to exist, and sometimes even strengthening them, means that there is space for people to say, "Oh, okay, I know a Democrat." Right? The president of the United States is out there saying Democrats are evil. It's funny because, like, if I asked Matt today, like, I get a lot of like, "What would Matt think about?" And I'm like, "I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know." But if I asked him today, I was like, "Are Democrats evil?" He'd be like, "No, you're a Democrat." Right? Like, I mean, I'm not the only Democrat he knows, but it makes it harder for Trump and MAGA and all these other demagogues to do their job, which is divide us and then demonize anyone who doesn't agree with them. And I want to, just before we're done with that, I want to directly address the point you made about people rejecting someone's humanity or identity. I think it's also these situations are different for different people. So
Yeah.
I think that if somebody says, you know, you're trans and I think that trans people don't have a right to exist, or something like that, I'm not like that. I think is very different than me saying, okay, my brother-in-law didn't get the COVID vaccine and I did. And so some of it is also for those of us who have the luxury of saying, my safety, my physical safety is not threatened. My own humanity is not being attacked. Then I think, if you're interested in engaging with the world and trying to solve the tremendous problems that we have, one of the ways to do it, one of the sacrifices that you can make as an American citizen, and I mean that in the, not like you have papers, but in the sense of like you co-own this country, then you should be part like an ambassador for the values that we have. And part of being an ambassador is not saying, go away, I don't want to talk to you.
I love the way you said that. So much nuance, and I think it's fair. And as you talked about, it's interpersonal. It's different for each person, for sure. Sometimes you need somebody. You just can't cut them out. No matter, they could have the craziest beliefs in the world, but like, I need that guy. I need to keep him in my life, or maybe even close, because he's the guy who picks me up and drives me around, or, delivers important things to my home, or any number of things. And so I think it's important to talk about how it's different for a lot of different people.
Yeah.
One size doesn't fit all.
I want to add one other thing to that too, which is actually, I'm going to add two other things. I'm going to use my prerogative as a guest. One thing is, I think it doesn't work, right? Like shunning people, generally speaking, it might be something you have to do for self-preservation. I can't speak to that, but it doesn't change people's minds, right? There's this idea that if I say, oh, screw you, that's holding them accountable. It's not holding, it just means they'll go find other friends. It means they're going to find online sources who say, see, you're amazing, and those people are hateful. And so it doesn't help, right? There's not a value to it. Again, if it's for self-preservation, you do what you got to do. But I think that's different. And the one other thing I would add to this, because I just, in some ways I have not had to reckon with this in my own life as like a straight white guy who's doing fine in any number of different dimensions. But immediately after October 7th, I remember, like, I saw people who I know in my life say, like, post stuff on the internet about how, in some cases, they were saying, like, October 7th was a false flag, right? Completely, I don't want to get into the Middle East, but that's, fully conspiracy theory out there. And I had this thought, and I was like, what I want to do is block you on Instagram or block you on whatever, right? Yeah. I don't want to talk to you. And then I thought about the experience I had with Matt, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna practice what I preach, and I think I don't agree with what somebody posted, but the experience of saying I'm going to stay connected rather than saying I'm going to cut off contact, I absolutely think it was better for me, and it was better in terms of, like, people had someone they could talk to, or at least just know, who saw the world differently. It didn't change their mind 100%, but at least it wasn't like it wasn't inviting them to be in this very, very limited bubble.
I think anything we can do to combat this new paradigm we find ourselves in, where politics is everything, and it is to me. I mean, I've got more litmus tests than anyone. I'm a huge asshole. But I also have a lot of friends, and I disagree with most of them on a number of things too. And so I really, and I like to think I'm a uniter in some ways. I want to bring people together that have different opinions on all kinds of things. It's so easy to lose people over big things. These are big things.
Yeah.
All the Middle East, trans issues, LGBT issues, race issues, religion issues, and any number of things, including vaccine. So, I mean, I love the effort that you're making, including with this book. There it is again. It's Only Drowned, a true story of learning to surf and the search for common ground. So it's your brother-in-law, and how did you write it? Like, how much time do you spend with him surfing? Are you staying in hotels together? Are you having drinks? Are you eating? Like, what's the time like that you spend with him? Because you're writing this book, you're basically creating material. So you're choosing a lot of experiences to provide the material. And it does, you're great to recognize it, and you're great to take all the risks to create it.
Well, the first thing I will say is, for me, and anyone who gets into surfing, and have you ever surfed?
No, but I snowboard, and I do a lot of things similar, and I have a lot of strong opinions about surfing. It's not as cool and everything, but the one thing that's true of much of what you write about, and it's true of me, is I'm not scared of the water per se, the way it sounded like you were to begin with. I would be quite like that, but I probably would be after I get slammed one time like you did.
Yeah, I can say, if you got to throw in a per se, I think you're a little scared of the water.
I'm a little scared. I'm just not sure. You describe it like that you overcame a really big fear. And I think I would have, like, for me, surf, I look at surfing going, I can do that because I can skateboard and snowboard. Yep. I know it's different. I know it's hard. And I know for you, it was a lot of things. Are you athletic beforehand at all?
Well, I grew up skiing, so it's not like I had never done anything that was like an outdoor sport.
Can you throw a ball? Can you throw a ball? Can you play ball sports?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at the White House, I batted leadoff on the softball team of the United States, which is still one of my.
I had no idea. To be fair, everybody there were amputees on the rest of the team, but you did stand stand up. Why so
No,
many?
I mean, so what I would say is like I was always kind of casually athletic, right? I wasn't winning anything, but I was
Got it.
participating.
Got it. I just
Um, I wrestled in high school, but I was
oh,
like, I think I came in fourth in like the New York private school state tournament,
that's
right? Like
badass.
like
That's
right in the middle.
that I get
Um,
it now. So surfing, yeah, it's
yeah,
not
but we're talking surfing. So, but surfing is different and any surfer is going to tell you this, and they all sound insufferable, but it's true. Surfing is different because it is a force of nature you don't experience, right? You snowboard, I ski. That's gravity. We know what gravity feels like. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "What is it like to ski?" Like imagine falling, but it's a little more controlled, and you're on snow, and it's awesome, and I love skiing. But you know the feeling to some extent. It's a force you're familiar with. Wave energy you do not encounter. So it's almost like this like new dimension that you're going to, and it's very addictive. So you were asking me about kind of how I structured the book. The number one thing I thought was, okay, I'm not going to be a professional surfer, so if I want to make surfing my job, I better write about it, right? Like that was anyone who starts surfing is like, okay, how do I do this as much as possible? So that was my first thought. And my second thought was I wasn't trying to like bring up conversations with Matt or create moments, but I did want to spend a lot of time with him, partly because it turned out he was a very good surf instructor, and partly because I was like, oh, this is interesting. This will be fun. And also partly because I was like, I want to try to get to the North Shore of Hawaii. And this was probably the biggest reason. I was like, if I want to get to the North Shore, that's dangerous, like legit dangerous. And doing it alone would not be smart. So that was the genesis of this was me saying, I need a partner in the water. And what we ended up, we surf a lot in Jersey. We were actually just out yesterday, but we also, we went to Santa Cruz, California. We went to Waco, Texas, where there's an artificial wave pool. We went to Spain and to France, which was kind of interesting. Basically, I had a romantic vacation with my wife that I repurposed at the last minute into a surf trip with her brother, which she had mixed feelings about. And then in the end, we went to Hawaii. And so, that was one of the things I didn't appreciate was how much just like spending time together outside of the water would be both part of the experience and part of the book. And before this all happened, right? So I started surfing 3 years ago. Before that, Matt and I had known each other for almost a decade. We had never been in a car, just the two of us. Right?
oh,
I think maybe like I'd been in the back of a car while like we drove to a Christmas party or
right,
something like that.
right.
But we had never just the two of us been in the car, right? Being like, oh, what music goes on, or just chatting. And so we went from that to like spending an enormous amount. I mean, I said this to my wife Jackie at one point. I was like, I had this realization. It's like, other than you, your brother is the person I've spent the most time with since the pandemic, and it's not even close, right? Also, because I'm a writer, I usually just like I sit alone in front of a desk.
It's fascinating because I saw you made this comment. You sat down with Jennifer Rubin at, is it Politics and Prose or Prose and Politics?
Politics and Prose, yeah, in DC.
And there was a moment that I wanted to recreate where she'd asked about something about your relationship with Matt and had you talked about it. And you had this hilarious comment. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you're like, we're men.
Yeah.
And I wonder about that because you can, I talk a lot about men and men's issues. I've been through a whole bunch of shit the last couple of years, and I've tried to talk about it openly and talk about how men communicate our own stuff, much less with each other. And so I have all kinds of thoughts and opinions. There's research on this. I kind of lived all that research and had a lot of discussions about politics and obviously surfing and things, but not so much about your feelings, your own emotions, much less how you feel about each other. Say a little bit about how that developed with you and him, and if you guys ever do talk about your relationship.
No, I mean, weirdly, the closest we've come to talking about how we feel about each other, and even just saying that, I'm like, it is like, I mean, it's like, like I went to all boys summer camp, right? So like the idea of like talking about being friends with other guys at like a boys camp was like very, this was whatever, like 1990s. It was the idea, it was just a different vibe, right? There was this sense of like, if you talk about your feelings, is that going to turn you gay? And like, we're living in or at least many of us are living in a more enlightened time, but old habits die hard, I think, to some extent, right? And there's that sort of internal shut off where you're like, I can't talk about this with another guy. The other piece of it,
I will say I did it. I did talk about my feelings once when I was that age. Turned gay for one day and then stopped and turned back.
Okay. That's
conversion, my own little conversion therapy.
I did not expect, Pete, that this interview would end with you endorsing conversion therapy, but there we
Not,
go.
not the kind you've heard about. It's just have sex with one guy.
A
When you're
new
vulnerable.
form of conversion therapy. Okay, this was a first for talking about this book.
It's
Um,
true though.
so
It's so true.
but so there is, and I think one of the things I feel like this is a moment culturally where on one hand people are like, seriously, like men are asking for like help and attention because they're struggling. Like men have had it pretty good for pretty much the whole time compared to women, and that is true. And it's also true that I think men are having a really tough time, and a tough time, and this is generalizing, obviously, but I think that straight men are having a set of challenges that most straight women or many straight women are not facing. And one of the challenges for straight men, and I say this as a Democrat more than anything else, is that a lot of straight men feel that most people, especially a lot of people in charge, and especially a lot of people who are in charge who are Democrats, don't care that they're struggling. And when you feel that people don't care about you, it's very hard to get them to listen to anything else you have to say. And so I think, so there's the political dimension, and then I think there's the personal dimension, right? Like part of the reason I think I struggled so much in the pandemic was that I didn't, I have friends who I really like, and but I didn't feel comfortable telling them that I was like in a tough place, right? Like even good friends, I didn't feel comfortable with that. And I think,
Hmm.
again, I'm generalizing, obviously. But I think as a generalization, if like you talk to most women who are, with men and you say, how did you do during the pandemic when everybody was isolated? And how did your male partner do? Most women I know are like, oh yeah, I did way better. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
It's a fascinating microcosm to look at the problem that men are struggling with. I think I cut you off there, but
No, no. I think it is this like, again, it's not saying like the moral of the story is that men are the ones who have it bad, right? It's that everybody is dealing with different stuff. And I do think that being a guy, it is hard. And it was funny to get, if you brought this up as like this was a question that I was asked at another event. And Jen, who's terrific and was a great moderator at that event,
yeah.
but it was like, oh, you're a woman. You wouldn't be asking me this question that way if you were a man, because you would at least know that it's not the default that we would talk about like what are we, right? And
Right.
the closest, weirdly, like the only way Matt and I have talked about this is oblique. Like you got to get in through the side door. Like so, for example, when the book was done, I called him up and he didn't want to read it before it was done. So I called Matt up and I said, just so you know, right, like if there's an asshole in the book, I want it to be me. If there's an idiot, I want it to be me. But it's like the story of us becoming friends. You're in the book a lot. And I do talk about some of the moments of like conflict between us.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, cool. And I was like, all right. But it was also, that was the first time I was like, aha, he agrees we're friends, right? Like that, this was like 2 years in. And I think like, I mean, yeah, I mean, like in general are able to talk. Weirdly, the book has given us a kind of neutral ground to talk about
I talk.
our own relationship.
I want to do a lot more about this one subject,
Yeah.
specifically within it. But I'll ask you one more question about Matt, and we'll go. But I just one thing I do is actively pick at men. Like I find when I'm talking to a man, especially when we're alone, that's steely, locked up,
Mm,
doesn't. I go right at it. Like I just point blank them. I kind of enjoy it. I'm not saying it's right but I enjoy being like, talk to me about your feelings. Like I ask them questions or even make fun of them. Do you guys ever talk about anything but camping gear? Like, are we going to talk about anything else but
yeah.
this? Like, do you get sad? And when you do, how do you deal? Like, and I just go after it. And it's a really interesting social experiment. I've kind of made a name for myself in my group and even with the
yeah.
show.
I think we're living in a time where that's a possibility, which is great.
Yeah.
At least among certain sets of straight men.
And
But I think the other piece of it is also, I mean, I wrote this in a piece somewhere once, but I was like, when like Matt said to me, hey, do you want to borrow like my 510 twin fin, which is like a board that he got at a garage sale. like to me that's very meaningful. I'm like, okay, now I can translate. I know what you're saying, which is like that's about trust because you really like that board.
Right.
And also that you kind of think of us as peers because when I started surfing, you would not think I had a chance in
Right.
hell of riding that board. So there's both the implicit stuff, but then I also think that's right. I do think that one of the things that I feel, and this is also just different people are different, right? I feel like if Pete, if you said to me, all right, how do you feel about that? Do you get sad? Tell me about it. I mean, obviously, I wrote a book about getting sad. Or at least
You
I
did,
start off sad.
yeah, you have a lot of
And
work.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person, right? But I do think it is some men are not just open to that, but kind of waiting for it. And other men are not there yet. And I think it's because it's frightening, right? Like, I just want to come back as we wrap up to for me, and it's funny because we talked about some heavy stuff. And this is like mostly it's a fun book about two guys surfing together. But that's the stuff I try to write is like, it's fun. And then sneakily, a few
Yeah.
weeks later, you're like, oh yeah, there was themes there. Huh. I didn't realize he had
And that's
themes.
what I love
That's kind of,
yeah, and I should have said it's hilarious and meaningful, and then just like that. David is very smart writer, and all of a sudden, you're like,
yeah, I'm just fishing desperately for compliments
"Here
here.
with
So I
me." I should have
appreciate that
said
it
something.
worked.
I would have
Um,
said something.
No, but I think that one of if there's kind of the biggest takeaway, it's actually not political. It's about fear. And surfing reshaped my relationship with fear, right? Like at a moment when I read the news this morning, it was terrifying. The news every morning these days is pretty terrifying. It's a moment when we're more afraid of each other than we've ever been.
Yep.
And also, we're talking about, guys and feelings, right? It's a moment where that shut off of saying, I don't want to talk about my feelings because it's scary. And one of the things that surfing did for me, and I hope even if you never surf, reading the book will do for you, is giving you new ways of thinking, a new mindset when it comes to fear, so that it's not so much saying, I'm going to overcome fear or I'm going to avoid it, but saying sometimes the fear is good. I've got to learn
Yeah.
how to use fear as a tool, right? Like fear is something I can embrace if I do it right. And that's what I learned surfing, and it's really helped me in the rest of my life.
I want to do a part two, and that part two we'll talk more about current events, politics, your thoughts on all of that, because you're
Yeah,
always.
let's do it.
But I know you got a lot more interviews to do for this book. Congratulations on it. I hope everybody listening or watching will get it. It's only drowning, which we never even got to it, but he said that to you.
Yes, that was Matt's way of reassuring me that it was going to be okay. I was like, okay, great. I'm reassured.
Congratulations, David. Thanks so much for spending this time with me, and I'm always excited to talk to you. We'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Always good talking to you.
Right. David Litt, everybody. There he goes. We were live. And that was awesome. And I'm still alive, still talking. I love talking to men about their feelings. I just wanted to ask him when he talked about, if a guy says to me, or if anybody says to me, but especially if it's a guy's like, hey, I went through a dark time. When I talk about my dark time, I have a name. I call it the suck. Some of my friends have embraced that. It wasn't my idea. I heard it on some like Vietnam War movie. They used to call it the suck, being there as being in the suck. So I appropriated a horrible war conflict to my privileged life and circumstances that I was struggling with. And I just love to ask people, what is your suck like? What was your dark time? What does it look like? Because suffering is different for everybody. Depression is different for everybody. Those words mean different things to everybody. Some people can't get out of bed. Some people can't stop self-medicating. Some people can't stop running. Like Forrest Gump, I think that was his thing. Forrest just kept running. He was just running from his problems, right? Isn't that the whole theme? Did I just figure that out? I'm not pulling on if I was going anywhere. I was running. So whatever your suffering is, whatever it looks like, whatever your depression is, I'm interested in it. And I know I'm not alone. And so men are afraid to talk about it for a lot of different reasons. And often it's just because, like, even if you're vulnerable, like, I don't have the words to describe it, or I don't want anybody worrying about me, feeling bad for me, or I'm tough, I'm stoic. But I find when I talk about my problems with other men, and I make sure to make space to hear about theirs. Those are the best relationships. It's like equivalent. You're not just dumping on each other. And I have two men that I do that really regularly with. And then we have sex. No, Campbell and Zatz. I go for a hike every week with Zach. We text a lot, and then Campbell and I talk every day. And so we're always going back and forth, sharing in a kind of balanced way. But maybe that's just me. So it's just hard sometimes when you don't have the words to describe it. So even if it's not a pride thing or a security thing, you're like, I don't know how to say how I'm feeling. And I don't know if this is depression or if it's anxiety or if it's just, fear, worry of uncertainty. But just looking at the chats. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. Rob Dog, Benny. Personally, I'm dead inside. Aaron, that's very white of you, Pete. Been in the suck for a long time. Do you think you'll get out of it? If you're in it for a long time, do you have an idea that you get out of it, or do you just like kind of succumb to it? Is what I wonder. It comes and goes for me, based on circumstances in my life more than anything else. All right, I don't know if any of this is interesting or if anybody's still watching. So, thanks for watching. Go support my daily podcast and patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That's my entire life now. Career, really. I poured everything I have into a daily podcast. It helps me, it helps other people. And yeah, Benny, the last 6 months are basically me realizing that Trump will make the second half of my life shit. Benny is so funny, man, and has been so consistently. You've been so consistently funny for so many years. And most of it is right here on or on social media. It's like text. Your jokes are. And like the chat at our Zoom hangouts or on Twitter or social media or here. I love it. Always makes me laugh. Your dark humor. But you make a good point, but I'm always like, maybe not. Maybe it won't be, man. Don't be so sure. Maybe you'll move. All right. That's it. Thanks everybody for watching and listening and supporting. And I will talk to you tomorrow at noon. If not later today, I might come back, talk with another guest I'm thinking about. We'll see. Thank you very much for subscribing wherever you are, following wherever you are. That's it. Bye-bye.